Good afternoon. Today we're here with some very good news for parts of Western Kentucky that have been through too much. In December of 2021, parts of Western Kentucky experienced the worst tornado disaster in our history. It took 81 lives, each one a child of God, still missed and mourned and grieved by their families and their communities. It leveled whole towns, including downtown of Mayfield and my dad's hometown of Dawson Springs. Standing outside that candle factory that next morning, we all made a promise that we would rebuild every structure and every life. And we have been hard at work fulfilling that promise since that day. You've heard me say it 1,000 times, but we will be there until this job is done. We will continue to find ways to help people rebuild. And we've worked hard. With the Western Kentucky Safe Fund, we've helped rebuild critical infrastructure. With KPDI dollars, we invested both in Mayfield and recently in Dawson Springs. And in Mayfield, already have a company called Osmondson coming in and bringing about 80 good jobs to that community. We started the Team Western Kentucky Tornado Relief Fund, where throughout these areas, we are at nearly 200 homes built or currently under construction to house those that were displaced. I think about Mayfield right now, that is going to be rebuilding their police station, their fire station, money for downtown City Hall. We are really starting to see things not just move, but really move. We've gone from building houses to rebuilding neighborhoods. But there is always a piece that FEMA did not cover and would not cover that concerned all of us, and those were rentals. Rental units are absolutely critical for all towns, but certainly towns of this size, and I know in Dawson, were hit almost directly. To help a town not just survive, but to thrive, affordable housing is so critical. And for all those survivors that might not have owned their home, that might not have qualified for certain FEMA or other insurance funding, there was a gap, and admittedly, it was a gap that kept me up at night. But Team Kentucky, through the Kentucky Housing Corporation and the Department of Local Government, have come through with an incredible solution. Today, we'll be making the largest housing announcement in either of those agencies' history. And we believe it's the single largest housing announcement in the history of Kentucky. Jointly, Kentucky, through the Department of Local Government, using DR funding, and KHC, are investing $223 million to build 953 affordable rental housing units across 4 counties. All 4 of these counties were hit in various degrees by the tornadoes. These housing units are going into Christian, Graves, Hopkins, and Warren counties. And these counties were also, some of them, hit with the storms just this last week that took the lives of 5 Kentuckians, and we mourn for them as well. I believe we have now arranged for payments of the funerals for each of those that were lost, because every loss, whether it was back in 2021 or these most recent storms, impact those families just as severely. But these funds, as we look at them, are going towards 11 projects across Western Kentucky. We're partnering with 5 development groups to complete this work. In total, we're building 76 rental units in Hopkinsville. We're building 122 rental units in Mayfield, Mayor. 88 units in Dawson Springs, 32 units in Madisonville, and 635 units in the city of Bowling Green. A full funding breakdown will be in the press release today. I'd like to call up Winston Miller, Director of the Kentucky Housing Corporation, to give us a few words.
Thank you, Governor. Very welcome. Good morning, everyone. Kentucky Housing Corporation is thrilled and proud to partner with the Department of Local Government, our friends there, for this historic funding announcement. This is a historic funding announcement. for many reasons. It supports disaster recovery and growth and job growth. It supports an increase in affordable housing for Western Kentucky, and it addresses the housing shortage that exists in the region and the state as a whole. This announcement is unprecedented. It's the first time for KHC that several things have occurred. As the governor has indicated, this is a project that is funded for the construction of more housing units than we've ever financed in a single housing application round. 953, I think, total. That's an historic occasion for us to be able to do that. We've committed such a significant amount of our funding to go alongside the funding that's being provided by DLG. That's something that we've not done before. And we've also incentivized our developers to utilize disaster recovery funds that are coming from DLG. To keep up with the economic and job growth, Kentucky needs to build more housing units. Today's announcement of the 953 units is a very significant step in closing the supply gap that exists in West Kentucky. Governor Beshear has provided incredible and steadfast leadership in the rebuilding of Kentucky's disaster-impacted communities. This is just another step, another example of that leadership. Thank you, Governor. KHC also appreciates the Department of Local Government aligning its disaster recovery funding with the funding that KHC has provided. Without this cooperative effort of these two agencies, the magnitude of today's announcement would not be possible. Finally, I want to thank the entire KHC team that were essential to today's announcement. With me today are Wendy Smith and Terry Helton, plus other members of our multifamily housing staff that made this really happen or enabled this to happen. Thank you. The awards announced by Governor Beshear today will benefit Western Kentucky for decades to come. Thank you.
These projects, as Winston pointed out, are not only going to help us rebuild, but also help continue our economic momentum in Western Kentucky. The year after the tornadoes hit, Site Selection recognized Mayfield for being one of the top micropolitan economic developers in the country. They brought in so many jobs in the 12 months after those tornadoes that they made that incredible list. Since the start of my administration, Mayor, we're now over 500 new jobs in Mayfield. Those are the results of $32 million in private investment. We're not just rebuilding from tornadoes. We're building stronger communities that are going to bring prosperity for generations to come. These are special days, and our people are going to have more days like this ahead. So with 122 new rental units coming to Mayfield, more of our Mayfield families are going to have a safe place to raise their families, to make memories. So I'd like to call up Mayor Onan.
I don't think Governor Beshear knows how much I have held on to his words. We will not stop until you are complete. Sometimes I fall asleep with that running on a loop in my brain, and that's exactly what has happened. And when he walked in here today, he said, here's another piece. We have been so blessed with the funding to rebuild our municipal buildings, which we lost every one of those, as did the county. That funding is now secure. We have been blessed by nonprofit organizations, both national and local, who have come in and built homes, sometimes for people who've never owned a home before, thus playing a role in ending some generational poverty within our community. But as tornadoes are wont to do, this tornado struck in the heart of our community, to the heart of our people who were the most vulnerable at some points. And it was those people who lived in these subpar rental homes that are now still struggling. And this piece today, this multifamily 122 units that will be coming to our hometown to house our people, is just heartwarming. I've used heartwarming so much, I don't know that I've probably just worn the gilding off of it, but there is nothing else to say about that. When you realize that these units will house individuals and families who have suffered enough and who continue to stay in Mayfield and continue to help us rebuild that community, you realize the role that everyone in this room, Kentucky Housing Authority, the governor, everybody who works in this administration, this Team Kentucky, how hard they've worked for the rebuilding of our community. Thank you is not enough. But from what you see, what will come from our community to rebuild not only Western Kentucky, but add to our Commonwealth as a whole, will be well worth every dollar invested. Thank you so very much.
Well, I'm hoping before we're done, we'll also see our mayor from Dawson Springs, Mayor Sewell. I can tell you on that first day, going from Mayfield to Dawson, the very first thing we had to do is get a generator for the pumps to get water back into town. The second thing we had to do was to get cell phone service back up because it was completely out in the area. But during that very first meeting, one of the first things that was said to me is, what about the apartments? What about the rental units? And the more that we learned about FEMA, we learned that funding was not going to be there, at least not in the same way. 88 rental units coming to Dawson Springs is going to ensure that we save that town, that we fill up the spec building that's part of the most recent KPDI program. These two are going to work with each other to create some big, bright opportunities for the people living in that town. And I keep thinking about Kara, who introduced herself to the world, who'd lost her brother at Thanksgiving, and then they lost their home during the tornado. And watching them, the McKnight family, rebuild, they're always talking about what else needs to be done in Dawson Springs outside of them, despite how much they've suffered. And this is another piece that I know they will be excited to see. I briefly spoke of Bowling Green's allotment, 600 plus units. They're necessary. They're necessary because of how hard that city was hit by the tornadoes, but they're also necessary because Bowling Green is absolutely booming. Look at AESC battery plant. It's going to create 2,000 jobs on its own. Or Tyson Foods that created 450 jobs. We just cut the ribbon on that $355 million facility. These are absolutely necessary to continue what is historic growth in Bowling Green. It was #1 in economic development for towns its size in the last rankings that came out, which is incredible. So we have a message from City Manager Jeff Meisel.
This is Jeff Meisel, City Manager for the City of Bowling Green, and just wanted to say thank you to the Department of Local Government for funding the affordable housing projects, one of which that will benefit the City of Bowling Green by 635 units.
These projects are going to be built by some amazing affordable housing developers across Kentucky. Wabuck Developers will build 332 units across all 4 counties. Today, we're joined by President Gary Watkins and his team. Gary, would you like to offer us a few words? Come on up.
Mayor. We've got a long history with Kentucky Housing Corporation. We go way back with them, and their passion that they have to try to solve the housing difficulties of Kentuckians is unsurpassed. We're one of the principals in a large project in Mayfield that was completely destroyed, and there was one elderly person who actually lost their life in that, and that hopelessness that comes with that. There's not a stronger feeling in this world than hopelessness, but this is going to bring hope back to these communities, and we're just appreciate the governor and his office and Kentucky Housing Corporation And it's an honor for us to be a part of this rebuild. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We're also joined by Director Travis Yates and the team from SOCAR. They are building 294 units across Warren, Hopkins, and Graves County. Travis, would you join us and say a word or two? All the way from the back.
I'm overwhelmed. Thank you so much for having us here. I have a gentleman with me that has become one of my dear friends and works with me as well. That woke up that morning. He lives in Western Kentucky, and he woke up that morning. He says, "I have a wife that has that is a nurse, and I have a chainsaw." And he jumped in the truck and he went down to Mayfield and rode on the buses that day. Pulled bodies out in front of families. And was communicating with me all day about what was going on. And he had us on the phone with Kentucky Housing within 2-3 weeks, Shannon Tudor, 2 or 3 weeks. And we have been communicating back and forth with Kentucky Housing, and they have said, "We hear you, we're with you, we're going to make this happen." And DLG with Travis Weber and his team, we are so pleased to see this day get here. We know it's needed. We are excited to be a part of it. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
So once again, I want to recognize the Department of Local Government and the Kentucky Housing Corporation for coming together in a new way that had never been done before, that ultimately led to what we believe is the largest housing announcement in state history, but certainly the largest housing announcement in Western Kentucky that will help rebuild those rental units that previously we did not have a solution for. Remember, a home is more than 4 walls. It's the security of raising your family. And for those that lost the place they were living, a new unit, a new home means so much. So what we are celebrating and we'll be celebrating, and I guess this next spring when construction begins on most of these, is 953 families that are going to have a safe and brand new place to live. I still remember talking to Kathy about a month after, and we're still looking around trying to see that future. And I think one of us, I don't remember which one, said Mayfield's going to be the newest town in Kentucky with the newest buildings and the newest homes. And that's going to be true in each and every one of these communities. People who have been through the worst deserve the best. And I hope today is another exciting announcement that said we're not going anywhere, just like we're not in the East. We'll have more information coming out about where we are on a lot of those projects because they're moving forward. The infrastructure's moving forward. We're going to be seeing housing come up on a couple of the high ground communities here this fall, which is really exciting. One in Knott and one in Perry County. So a lot more to come in both of these areas. So with that, we'll turn it over for questions. Tom?
Governor, I have a question for the mayor, if I could.
Yes, sir.
That's up to her.
Yes, sir.
Okay. I hadn't been in Mayfield I hadn't been in Mayfield after the tornado until August. I went to Fancy Farm and I said, I'm just gonna go drive through there and see what it looks like. You can imagine how it
I
looked.
recall, yes.
How difficult as mayor of the city has it been for you to see such devastation and work feverishly or I don't know how, I don't know the best word for it, to get the town back on its feet?
It's painful to see a town you call your hometown just in rubble, and that's exactly what it was. I've said this many times, I'm a school teacher. So I could keep kids quiet in a junior history classroom, but I didn't know how to do this. And I truly meant what I started with. Governor Beshear and I stood outside that candle factory, which had just pancaked that morning, and he told me we're not going anywhere. And when we got back to the emergency operating center, he said, I will not let your town go bankrupt. And I've held on to both of those throughout these now almost 2.5 years. And the work of the people of our community has just been the shining star. I think I sadly thought, I can't get this done by myself. Well, I didn't have to, because these people are rebuilding their hometown. And it's with corporations like Osmondson that are coming. We stood here on this stage and I told Heather, the CEO of Osmondson, I said, I've been praying for a company like you because I knew there was one out there that would want to be on the ground floor to rebuild our community. From that tragedy, and Governor, it was your words, not mine, that said you're going to have a brand new town. The devotion of our citizens and the determination of every city employee, every department head, the leadership they provided, with the funding, the backing, the encouragement of Team Kentucky is what's gotten us to where we are today. I don't travel anywhere in Kentucky, and I do get to tell our story a lot that I don't hear. We've been praying for Mayfield, and I would be very lax if I didn't mention that, because that's why we are where we are today, too. Thank you for that question.
Governor, how long did it take you to get to these monies, to get to that number? Did it start right after 2021? And what were the obstacles and challenges to get to that number?
So there are two pools of dollars that come into this. One is the CDBG DR funds that came for the tornado event. You get those separately depending on, we have a separate allocation of those for the flooding. So these dollars have to be used in these counties for this purpose. And then KHC and their regular funding mechanisms were able to work with the Department for Local Government and ultimately take these two sources and do something much, much bigger that also addressed some of the challenging economics about building rental units in more rural areas than our large urban ones. And so this was a solution that they brought to me, and they deserve a lot of credit for coming up with this after those CDBG DR dollars opened up in Western Kentucky. So once the funding was available, we had some announcements, because there are just a couple of towns in the east that had been flooded too, that some of these dollars were available for, and we had some announcements there, and then this one came together. So this is folks in government coming up with a new way to do something, and we don't always see that. And they deserve a lot of credit for not just doing things the same way we always do. Right? That's the phrase I hate to hear, and I will never agree with something if that is the rationale, but coming up with a really innovative way to make a big difference.
Governor, how does it work? Who owns the rental properties, and how do you ensure those displaced Kentuckians find their way into those properties?
Yeah. Wendy?
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Wendy Smith, Deputy Executive Director over Housing Programs at Kentucky Housing Corporation. So your first question was, who gets the dollars? How do the dollars flow? So at KHC, we're very used to doing what you might consider a public-private partnership. We often, for multifamily development, which is complex, requires a lot of funding, requires having either your own or really good contractors to do the building, a compliance team, an asset management team, and somebody to watch all the money. So we regularly work with developers, for-profit and not-for-profit, who are private. So we do a funding announcement that funds are available. You can submit your proposal to us. That's a robust proposal. It has a lot of detail in it. And then we score them and evaluate them. What was different this time is DLG did an application round at the very same time. So each of us encouraged the applicants to seek the other funding as well. And then together we kind of scored and valued projects to decide what to fund. So the dollars will go to private developers who will build the housing. And then in terms of how people get on the list to move into one of these units, I want to make it clear it's going to be 18, 24 months or more before that's a reality, right? It takes time, but there will be multiple ways. There will probably be signs and ways to put in an application as a tenant right at the property. But then also these organizations have professional property management arms that will also take via website, via phone call. So there will be multiple ways for tenants to get on the list. Yeah.
How do you guarantee that do victims get a certain preference?
Our aim is to offer a priority. And so what was written into DLG's action plan for these dollars is that for the first, I believe it's 4 months, don't quote me, I need to look that up, there is a preference for survivors for a certain period of time, and then it would be made open to anyone who is income eligible. And depending on the dollars, there will be different income eligibilities. This is really going to be workforce and affordable housing, folks who are moderate incomes and folks who are low income.
So what would be the average cost of rent?
It's really going to range, right? Because it's scaled based on number of bedrooms, and we try to keep it affordable. So I'm going to throw you out some rough examples. It's going to vary county by county by county. HUD sets and the IRS sets these numbers on the county basis. But it could be for a 1-bedroom, let's say $600 to $700. For a 2-bedroom, I would probably say $750 to $900, and then up from there. If you want the exact scaling of that, we can get it to you because it is set county by county and funding source by funding source.
Quick question. So people would be able to use their Section 8 vouchers on
Yes.
these properties?
Yes.
And they will not be added to housing authorities' portfolios?
No.
Stay private?
No, these will remain privately owned, privately managed units, but we do mandate anybody who utilizes our funding and financing has to be willing to accept a Section 8 voucher.
From now on, Wendy's answering all the questions at all of my press conferences. But let me just add on in that. I mean, I talked to folks that said they did not think their rental units would get rebuilt that had been hit. So this is pretty incredible.
I know there are, of course, limitations with, the force of some of these tornadoes and everything, but are we building these units to perhaps be a little stronger to withhold
Yes.
how we certain storms?
And everything we're rebuilding afterwards is built to withstand significantly additional stress. If you come out to one of the home dedications, they can walk you through the materials that are being used all the way down to the nails and how they are being built. I was also, in Barnsley, in the community that was hit twice in 2021, and then the Sunday before Memorial Day, they had put in tornado shelters. And I talked to a woman who rode out the tornado in one of the shelters that have been put in by the Red Cross since then. So we're both trying to build stronger, but also to recognize that an EF4 to an EF5 is going to do damage, and having that shelter is really important. But I got to say, I was really proud of the Red Cross and I saw it as we were driving and stopped and got out and was talking to folks. Their house was hit. It wasn't leveled, who had gone and stayed in what the Red Cross had put in.
Governor, there's a CDBG DR coming for Eastern Kentucky of almost 300 million applications are now being accepted for that. How much more difficult is it going to be to do this kind of thing in the East because of the different situations with personal income, cost of building, and so on? Characterize that.
Yeah, our biggest challenge in the East isn't really just the poverty issue, which is everywhere in Kentucky. It's the flat land issue. It's where do we find enough land outside of the floodplain? Because when we looked at what the options were in the East, either people were going to rebuild in the floodplain and they wouldn't qualify for FEMA again, but more than that, they could be harmed again. They were going to move out of a place they loved, or we were going to build these high ground communities. The CDBG DR funds are really going to help us do the building part on these high ground communities. So take Chestnut Ridge, which is by the Sportsplex in Knott County. We have the access road going right now. We've got the bids in for the first phase of those roads. We'll be putting that in with the sewer at the same time. The sewer, I think, starts this week. And so the most challenging part with the high ground communities isn't building the houses, it's the infrastructure. Think about the grades of the roads, and then running the water and sewer when our systems were already old and needed upgrades themselves. But all that's happening. Skyview is moving pretty quickly too. One thing I do think we'll want to look at is the rental possibilities on these high ground communities too, because that rental need is still there. Certainly most of the plats laid out right now are for single families, but that's where we were operating until they came up with this opportunity for these. So I think you'll start seeing, we've participated in 30 plus homes from our fund where people have found land outside of the floodplain. And then the one in Wayland in Floyd County is outside the floodplain. Technically, it's not on an old mine, but we're building a whole bunch of houses at the same time there. That one's really neat. And how fast they're building the whole neighborhood at the same time. But what we're going to see is, especially starting in the fall, and I think those two high ground communities, and then the cottages at Thompson Branch, which is the 9 or 10 unit one in Letcher County, you'll see homes on all of those. The rental will probably take a little longer, but we're about 2.5 years after the tornadoes when we're announcing this piece.
So will there be a larger percentage of the CDBG DR used for infrastructure in the east than you're having used in the west?
Yes, they'll have to be. They'll have to be. And our goal is that should be some of the last funding that we tap if we can. So ARC's given us some grants. We were able to use some of the team Eastern Kentucky, some of the Eastern Kentucky Safe Fund, though that wasn't re-upped in certain ways, and other opportunities. But yes, some of this money will need to go there. But we have some really good nonprofit housing partners that are also ready to go. I mean, they're really just waiting on getting the road and getting the sewer. And the part that Jerry Roll's group is working on up on Chestnut Ridge will start a little bit faster because it's a little bit closer, but it's going to use the same roads, et cetera. And we get it right up to the property, and then they take it in.
Governor, you mentioned last week that you were starting a new fund for people that suffered losses in the Memorial Day outbreak, so to speak. Do you have any more information on that?
Well, what I announced is that we were gonna find the funds to pay for those funerals, which is where we're starting, which we've done. The Kentucky Distillers Association is going to pay for one. We have another nonprofit that just stepped up. I just heard their name this morning. We'll get that out. That's going to pay for the other four. We're also working specifically with Hopkins County right now on debris cleanup. We're going to try to help cover more of the upfront costs because they are still awaiting FEMA compensation for upfront costs that they took. You're going to see a lot of the cleanup in Charleston and in Barnsley happening. You know, they both have Dawson Springs mailing addresses. They're just barely north of Dawson. If you know that area and you get off on that exit and you got the subway and the gas station that's right there. If you turn left, you'll go into Dawson. You'll pass where my grandparents are buried. If you turn right, it's a mile, maybe a mile where Charleston is that got hit so hard there. And it is a miracle that only one person passed away in Charleston from what's there. It went right down the road. And so it's an EF3 taking out at least 30 yards of anything on both sides. And that's why it took about 5 hours to cut in and get there because all the trees were knocked down over the road. I've never seen anything like that. And then, 40 yards at least on either side of the road, anything that was there was either leveled or pretty close to.
Governor, do you have any reaction to the conviction of Donald Trump and the reaction of Republicans there too?
Only that I've been a lawyer most of my life, and I was Kentucky's top prosecutor, and I believe in our jury system, and you have to. If you're a prosecutor that goes in front of a jury on all types of crimes, you have to trust them to get it right. And there are multiple opportunities of appeal in our system, I believe, in our judicial system and in juries.
You think Alvin Bragg had a viable prosecutorial strategy?
I haven't looked at his strategy specifically, but those are 12 jurors picked from across different professions. When you hear about where some of them got news from, it's very different. But listen, you're supposed to be able to get 12 jurors of your peers in the places where things are tried. And if you attack a jury system in one instance, what does it mean in every other conviction of any type in our criminal justice system? All right. Thank you all very much.
Congratulations.
Yes.